And although you kind of know that this might happen, you don't really think about it very much. Not least of all because the monarchy is about continuity.
Queen Camilla quietly signed away one of her properties without telling anyone in the royal family. Nobody was supposed to notice, but someone did. Princess Anne, the no-nonsense royal in the family, noticed, and she wasn't prepared to stay silent. Now, the whole situation has resulted in a dramatic legal confrontation. What exactly did Camilla try to hide? The secret property transfer. For a very long time, Ray Mill House was more than just a building. It was the place that defined Camilla's private life before she ever became a queen. Nestled in the quiet village of Lecoq in Wiltshire, the 19th century estate sat on 12 acres of well-kept gardens with 6 bedrooms, a swimming pool, and stabling for horses. The River Avon ran nearby, giving the property a peaceful, almost hidden quality. Camilla bought Ray Mill House in 1996 for £850,000, shortly after her divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles. She lived at Ray Mill House for several years following her divorce, and has spoken warmly about the property many times over the years, particularly about the garden she tended with great care. That garden meant something to her. It was not a royal garden maintained by staff on a palace payroll. It was hers. She planted things herself. She watered things herself. She watched seasons change from those grounds. The house gave her something that no official royal residence could ever fully offer. A sense of belonging that was entirely separate from her duties as queen. Royal biographer Ingrid Seward once described Ray Mill House as Camilla's release from royal life. Before she married Charles, she reportedly made a pact with him that she would keep the house as her own private retreat. She would go there most weekends when possible, and during the summer months to spend time with her family. This was not just a place she visited, it was the anchor of her private world. She had made it clear, even before their union, that she would never give it up entirely. It was where she rebuilt her life, found her footing again, and eventually prepared for the most dramatic transformation of her existence. King Charles understood what the property meant to his wife. He later used private funds to purchase the neighboring property, the Old Mill, after concerns arose that it could be turned into a short-term holiday rental and wedding venue. A buyer had been looking to turn the space into a commercial site, which would have brought strangers regularly down the private lane that Camilla shared with the neighboring plot. Charles moved quickly and quietly to stop that from happening. The couple had always treated Ray Mill as something to be protected, not advertised. Then, in early 2026, something changed. Reports surfaced that Camilla had signed ownership of Ray Mill House over to her family members. Land registry documents showed that the newly registered owners were her son-in-law, Harry Lopes, and financier Jake Irwin, who reportedly represent her daughter, Laura Lopes, and her son, Tom Parker Bowles, respectively. The transfer was done discreetly. There was no formal notice from the palace. The story broke only because a journalist had cross-checked land registry records and noticed the change in registered names. Sources explain that as trustees, Harry Lopes and Jake Irwin hold the legal title for land registry purposes, but are not the beneficial owners. A beneficial owner is the real person who owns, controls, or benefits from an asset, even if someone else's name appears on legal documents. In plain terms, the house was being placed into a trust arrangement, a legal structure designed to manage the property on behalf of Camilla's children, who would be the real beneficiaries. This kind of method is not unusual among wealthy families in Britain. It can protect property from certain taxes and ensure it passes smoothly to the next generation. The property held deep sentimental meaning for the whole family. The residence had particular significance because Laura Lopes and Harry Lopes hosted their wedding reception there in 2006. That connection made the transfer feel natural from Camilla's perspective. She was passing something precious to the people she loved most. The house would stay in the family and would not be sold. It would not become a hotel or a commercial venue. From her point of view, it was a loving and sensible step forward. But outside the family circle, the discovery of the transfer caused a different kind of reaction entirely. People started asking why it had been done without any public notice. They asked why the Queen's name was no longer on the legal documents. They asked what kind of arrangement had been put in place and whether it had been discussed with anyone else in the royal family. A royal source later told the British media that the new arrangement was described as a realistic solution. both a sound financial move and a way of maintaining the Queen's privacy, protection, and continued enjoyment of her much-loved home without any public funds being used. That explanation satisfied some. But for others inside the palace, it raised more questions than it answered. The word discreetly appeared in nearly every report that followed. That word, perhaps more than anything else, is what set off the chain of events that came next. In royal circles, doing something discreetly and doing something secretly are not always the same thing. But to those who were watching closely, the distinction was not always clear. A property worth hundreds of thousands of pounds had changed hands. The Queen's name had come off the documents, and no one in the wider royal family had been told it was happening. Princess Anne finds out the truth. Princess Anne has never been the kind of person who waits to be told things. She finds out for herself. She has spent decades operating in the background of the royal family, with a level of dedication that most of her relatives have never matched. Having inherited the firm and dutiful traits of her late mother, Queen Elizabeth, Anne has long been seen as a royal workhorse who helps hold the institution together with her no-nonsense attitude. She is not a pushover and does not suffer fools gladly. These are not just flattering descriptions, they are accurate ones. Anne is the kind of person who reads the fine print, notices what others miss, and does not let things slide past without comment. The news about Ray Millhouse reached Anne the same way it reached most of the public, through the press. That alone was enough to raise her concern. When something significant happens within the royal family or connected to it, there is an expectation of internal communication. Major decisions, financial arrangements, changes to property that could reflect on the institution. These things are usually flagged at some level before they become public. Those who have worked closely with Anne over the years have described her as someone who calls a spade a spade. If she doesn't like something, she says so. She doesn't tiptoe around anyone. When she reads something in a newspaper that she believes should have reached her privately first, that directness tends to sharpen considerably. What makes the issue even worse is the long and complicated history between Anne and Camilla, which goes back further than most people realize. Before Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles in 1973, Andrew had a romantic relationship with Princess Anne. According to royal biographer Sally Bedell Smith, Anne and Andrew's romance began in 1970. But unfortunately, the relationship could not lead to marriage. Andrew Parker Bowles was Catholic, and at the time, his faith presented an unavoidable obstacle to any marriage with Princess Anne, who stood fourth in line to the throne and was bound to the Church of England. Eventually, their romance ended. Andrew married Camilla, and two separate but intertwined paths began moving forward. It was a tangled web of shared history that never fully untangled. According to royal author Angela Levin, Princess Anne was for many years opposed to the idea of Camilla being granted the title of Queen Consort. Anne reportedly initially gave Camilla the cold shoulder. Her relationship with Camilla was particularly awkward because they had both been involved with Andrew Parker Bowles. That awkwardness did not disappear with time, it just softened in public. The two women learned to perform harmony for official occasions. But people who know them both have always noted a subtle tension beneath the surface, a carefully managed distance that neither side ever fully closed. After Prince Charles and Camilla married in 2005, Queen Elizabeth's private secretary drew up a document declaring that Princess Anne would no longer have to curtsy to Camilla. That document said everything without saying anything at all. It was a formal acknowledgement that the relationship between the two women required careful management at the highest level. A protocol had to be created specifically to handle the friction. That is not something that happens when two people simply have a minor personality clash. It happens when the underlying tension is deep enough to require structural solutions. When the news about the Ray Millhouse transfer broke publicly in early 2026, Anne's reaction was not one of idle curiosity. She began looking into the details, the trust arrangement, the names on the land registry documents, the timing of the transfer, the way it had been handled without any internal communication. All of it pointed to a decision that had been made entirely within Camilla's private circle. Reports had noted lingering tensions between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla for some time, with sources observing that the two senior royals had a residual coolness between them. The property transfer gave that coolness a specific and concrete focus. What made Anne particularly sharp in her response was not just what had been done, it was how it had been done. a property that sat in close proximity to royal estates, a property that had been discussed in the context of the royal family's future planning, including speculation about its potential role as a residence for Camilla after Charles, had been put into a private trust arrangement without any formal notification to the wider family. Reports had previously noted that King Charles had been eyeing Royal Lodge as a potential dowager house for Camilla, and that the institution was paying attention to how Camilla was managing her property interests moving on. Anne was among those paying attention. Anne's reputation for putting the institution ahead of personal interests has defined her entire royal career. She doesn't acquire extra properties. She doesn't seek financial benefits that could embarrass the crown. Her public personality has long been described as someone who does not tolerate nonsense, while maintaining a still impressive record of public service and duty. When she looked at what Camilla had done with Ray Millhouse, she did not see a routine family financial decision. She saw something that she believed deserved a formal response. And Anne, when she believes something deserves a formal response, does not send a letter. She takes action. The emergency court hearing. The move that Princess Anne made was not a casual one. It was deliberate and well calculated. Those who know her well have always said she does not raise formal concerns unless she is fully prepared to see them through. When she decided to push for a court hearing in connection with the Ray Millhouse transfer, she had already done her groundwork. She understood the legal structure of what had been done, the trust arrangement that had been put in place, and precisely what questions she believed needed to be answered in a formal setting. Clearly, the core of Anne's concern rested on the structure of the transfer itself. Reports confirmed that Harry Lopes and Jake Irwin held the legal title to Ray Millhouse for land registry purposes, but were not the beneficial owners. The beneficial owners, the people who actually benefit from the property, were Camilla's children, Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles. This kind of arrangement, where legal ownership and beneficial ownership are separated, is a well-established device in estate planning. It is used legally and widely, but it also creates a structure where the true nature of ownership is not immediately obvious from public records alone. Anne's position was that the circumstances around this particular transfer required examination. The urgency of an emergency filing is a legal tool used when a party believes that a situation is developing in a way that could cause irreversible consequences if not addressed quickly. In property law, this can mean anything from preventing a further sale to preserving the status of an asset, while questions about it are being resolved. Anne's legal team argued that the transfer, having already been finished and registered, needed to be checked before any further changes could be made to the property or its management structure. The emergency classification was not about drama. It was about speed and legal preservation. The specific demands in the filing were centered around transparency and disclosure. Anne wanted a full accounting of when the decision to transfer the property was made, who was involved in that decision, what the financial motivations behind it were, and whether the arrangement had any implications for royal assets or the crown more broadly. The trust structure placed the property beyond Camilla's direct name, but Camilla was still understood to be living there and using it as her personal retreat. The question being pressed was whether this arrangement reflected something more than routine estate planning. There were also questions around the timing. The transfer happened in a period when King Charles's health had been a source of ongoing concern, and when conversations about the future of the monarchy and its assets were already in circulation. Reports from late 2025 had noted that despite positive news about the king's cancer treatment being scaled back, sources close to Camilla were watching her property interests carefully, with the idea that she was taking steps to secure her position going forward. The timing of the property transfer, coming so soon after the discussions, gave Anne reason to press for answers about the intent behind it. The legal framing that Anne's side pursued was precise. It didn't accuse Camilla of wrongdoing outright. It requested a formal hearing to examine the circumstances of the transfer, the beneficial ownership arrangement, and whether proper procedures had been followed, given the property's connection to wider royal financial considerations. A royal source had previously described the transfer as a practical solution that involved no public funds. Yet, Anne's position was that a private account to the press was not a substitute for a formal legal accounting. She wanted the arrangement reviewed by a court, not explained away in a statement. The filing created immediate speculation. Legal proceedings connected to the royal family are extremely rare. It had previously been noted that the last time a member of the royal family had appeared in a court proceeding was when Princess Anne herself pleaded guilty to a charge under the Dangerous Dogs Act in 2002, after her dog bit 2 children in Windsor Great Park. She had appeared, paid her fines, and handled the matter directly. She had never used a court as a platform to challenge another royal. The fact that she was now doing so made clear how seriously she was taking the matter. The hearing was scheduled quickly, as emergency applications typically are. Both sides were required to provide formal legal submissions. Camilla's representatives were notified through the proper legal channels. The matter was placed before a judge who would decide whether the emergency application had sufficient basis to proceed to a full hearing. The palace, for its part, said nothing publicly. The silence from Buckingham Palace was noted by observers as a sign of just how sensitive the situation had become, and how carefully everyone involved was trying to manage the fallout. Camilla's camp. Response, denial, and damage control. The response from Camilla's side came quickly but carefully. Those close to her were not caught entirely off guard. They had known the transfer would eventually become public when the land registry records were updated. What they had not fully anticipated was the speed and force of the formal legal challenge that followed. Within days of the court application becoming known, a concerted effort began to frame the transfer in the most simplest terms possible and to manage the narrative before it spiraled further out of control. The first line of response was factual. Sources close to Camilla emphasized that the transfer simply formalized arrangements within the family and preserved the house's role as a private residence rather than turning it into a commercial site. This was an intentional framing by pointing to the protection of the property from commercial development. Camilla's team was attempting to redirect attention away from the trust structure and toward the idea that the transfer was actually a safeguarding measure. This meant that the move had been made to protect something precious, not to hide anything or gain any financial advantage at the expense of others. The second line of response focused on the financial details. A royal source told the British media that the arrangement was described as both a sound financial investment and a way of maintaining the Queen's privacy, protection, and continued enjoyment of her much-loved home. The emphasis on private funds was pointed out. It was a direct attempt to preempt any suggestion that taxpayers or crown resources had been involved. By making clear that the transfer was entirely self-funded and privately managed, Camilla's allies hoped to remove one of the most politically sensitive elements from the conversation. But the legal challenge was not primarily about public funds. It was about the structure of the arrangement, the timing of it, and the lack of internal communication before it was completed. Camilla's camp struggled to address those concerns with equal clarity. The fact that the transfer had been described in the press as being done discreetly, a word that appeared in multiple reports, was itself a problem. Taking action discreetly when it involves property connected to the royal family invites scrutiny rather than deflecting it. The language chosen by those briefing journalists may have made the case harder to manage, not easier. Inside Buckingham Palace, the tensions were considerable. King Charles found himself in an extremely delicate position. Reports had previously described the relationship between Charles and Camilla as one that had settled into a carer-patient dynamic following his cancer diagnosis, and that Camilla had days when the pressures of royal life felt overwhelming. Charles was not well placed to step into an open dispute between his wife and his sister. His health remained a concern. His public standing depended in part on keeping up the appearance of a stable and united royal family. An emergency court hearing involving his closest female relatives was exactly the kind of story that could tarnish everything he had been working to protect. Palace aides moved behind the scenes to try and bring the heat down. Private communications were exchanged at senior levels. There were attempts to find a resolution that would allow the court application to be withdrawn before it became a full public hearing. Those conversations were intense because Anne was not in the habit of being talked out of positions she had taken on principle. She had filed the application because she believed it was warranted. A word from a courtier was not going to change that. The people trying to mediate understood that they were dealing with someone who had decades of experience navigating royal politics and who was not going to be managed. Camilla's children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, were also drawn into the situation. The arrangement was understood to benefit Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles directly, with Harry Lopes and Jake Irwin listed as trustees on their behalf. Neither of Camilla's children had any public role in the royal family. They were private individuals who had generally stayed out of royal controversy. Finding themselves named in land registry documents at the center of a legal dispute tied to the institution was not a position any of them had wanted or welcomed. They were both deeply uncomfortable with the public attention. Meanwhile, the media coverage added to the pressure. Every day the story remained in the headlines was another day that the palace had to manage questions it was not ready to answer. Journalists began pulling at threads that the palace would have preferred to leave undisturbed. The tension between Anne and Camilla, their shared history with Andrew Parker Bowles, their long-standing personal friction, all of it began to surface in coverage that went well beyond the property transfer itself. What had started as a legal and financial matter was becoming a full picture of a royal family under visible strain, with two of its most prominent women on opposite sides of a formal dispute. The implications for royal family going forward. The Raymill House affair has exposed something that the royal family has spent years trying to keep out of public view. The institution depends on the appearance of unity. It depends on the idea that whatever happens behind closed doors, the people who represent the crown are broadly aligned in purpose and in behavior. When a senior royal initiates formal legal action against the queen consort over a property transfer, that appearance becomes impossible to maintain. The fracture is visible. The question now is how deep it runs and whether it can be repaired before it does lasting damage. King Charles is the person most affected by this. He has spent the years since his accession trying to build a stable monarchy after a period of crisis. His health challenges, the fallout from Harry and Meghan's departure, the ongoing controversy around Prince Andrew, all of these had already tested the institution's resilience. Reports noted that Camilla had days when the pressures of royal life felt overwhelming, and that the couple's relationship had become shaped by a carer-patient dynamic following Charles's cancer diagnosis. Adding a legal dispute between his wife and his sister to that burden is not a small thing. It places Charles in a position where any action he takes risks alienating one of two people he needs beside him. The question of Camilla's future role and security has been part of royal planning discussions for some time. Reports from late 2025 indicated that Charles was already linked to potential plans for Camilla's long-term accommodation, with Royal Lodge discussed as a possible dowager house for her should she outlive him. The Raymill House transfer, viewed in that context, begins to look less like a simple estate planning step, and more like one part of a broader effort by Camilla to secure her personal position. That is not an unreasonable thing for any person to do, but when it happens without clear communication, especially in a family where trust is already fragile, it easily sparks doubt and tension. Small actions begin to look intentional, and silence creates room for fear to grow. This is exactly how situations escalate into urgent legal battles. Anne's choice to take formal legal steps goes beyond the immediate conflict. It reflects a firm boundary, showing that there are clear limits to what she will tolerate from those who have married into the family, no matter their position. She has spent her entire life serving the crown without complaint, without seeking additional resources, without putting her personal interests above the institution's needs. She has long been seen as having inherited the hardworking and dutiful traits of her late mother, and as someone who is no pushover, and does not allow things she considers improper to pass without challenge. Her willingness to use the court system to challenge Camilla's property arrangement reflects a view that some lines exist which cannot be crossed without consequences, no matter how politically inconvenient it is to say so. The broader public has been watching the royal family with a kind of slow attention for several years. Support for the monarchy in Britain remains significant, but has shown signs of softening among younger generations. Stories about internal disputes, property arrangements, and legal filings don't help. They reinforce a narrative that the institution is out of touch with the financial realities faced by most people, and that its members are more focused on protecting their own assets than on the duties they were born to fulfill. The palace knows this. That is why the public silence from Buckingham Palace throughout this episode has been so carefully maintained. The legal process itself will now take control of how everything unfolds, removing it from private handling. If the emergency hearing moves forward and the court decides to fully review the transfer, then every layer of the situation will be opened up. The structure of the trust, the financial reasons behind it, and even private conversations tied to the decision could all face close examination. This kind of exposure would be highly unusual. A civil case like this could shift long-standing boundaries and bring serious consequences. If, on the other hand, a private resolution is found before the hearing advances, the damage has still been done. The story is already public. The details of the transfer, the names on the land registry documents, the trust structure, the tension between Anne and Camilla, none of that would disappear because the lawyers reach an agreement. It becomes part of the permanent record of how this period of royal history unfolded. Future biographers and historians will note it. Future discussions about the transparency of royal finances will reference it. Sources who had been tracking the internal atmosphere around the royal couple noted that Camilla had never wanted the transfer to become a public story, and that the manner in which it came to light, through a land registry check by a journalist, was exactly the kind of exposure that she and Charles had always sought to avoid at Raymill House. The irony is that the quieter the transfer was handled, the louder the reaction became. Transparency, even in private matters, tends to be less damaging than the appearance of secrecy. That is a lesson that is costing the royal family considerable political and reputational capital, and one that will not be forgotten quickly by any of the people involved.